Hello, welcome to the Right Room with Hilary Phelps. We are wrapping up National Recovery Month as September comes to an end, and our last woman who has a strong recovery program who's been sober for 16 years is Nisha Patel. And similar to my story, Nisha waited 16 years to start sharing her story of experience, strength, and hope. She is a therapist. She's trained in DBT, hypnotherapy, and brain spotting, and now she works with people looking to get sober and helping them along that path. So this conversation was just like talking to a friend. We laughed a lot, and I hope you enjoy. Hi, Nisha. Welcome to the Right Room. How are
Thank you
you?
so much. I'm doing well. So excited to be here today.
Good. I am so excited to have you. And, our show is about women in transition. And so I love to highlight stories of women every space, every place, different transitions. And you've had a lot, as we all have, but meaning, I know you got sober, you're in long-term recovery, and we talk a lot about those, and we've shared, stories of recovery here. And what I would love to talk about is long-term sobriety with you. How
Mm.
does that sound?
Yeah, that's wonderful. I would love to share more about that. Yeah.
Because I think, we talked about this a little bit. We know each other. We're
Yeah.
friends. I consider you a friend.
Yeah. We're friends. Or
We were
Jem.
just yeah, we were just talking about gems. I'd love for you to share that. But these different pockets of recovery, 1 to 5 years looks one way, and 5 to 10 years looks a different way, and
Hmm.
then 10 to 15 could look different. And I didn't understand that in early recovery and sobriety. And you shared something with me recently about year 14, and what that looked like for you, and kind of that challenge. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Like year 14, what was your 13 like? And then how did that change in year 14?
Yeah, it definitely was a big transition phase, right? I think for me, where I was in life was I was recovery life, but then I was a mom.
Mm.
I'm a wife, right? We were also going through COVID at that time, trying to stay afloat myself mentally, physically, spiritually, all of the above, right?
Yeah.
The foundation of recovery, the 1 to 5, what we said,
Yes.
you try to do that and some, right? And for me, I feel like 14 was when I realized that, yes, I was sober, right? And I was in the middle, but there was something missing. It was that I had gone back into my hyper productivity mode because I was so spread so thin, right? And so, yes, I was doing the praying and the gratitude and all of that, but I was missing that feeling you have early on.
What is
You
that
know, that
feeling? Can you
that
talk
pink
about that?
cloud?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Talk
where
about that
you,
a little bit. For
yeah,
anybody that doesn't know what the pink cloud is, can you share?
right. Yeah, yeah. So early in recovery, we talk about like when you get, sometimes they say 90 days, sometimes it's like a year, but you get this pink cloud where like life is going well. Things are working out, not always, but even when they're not working out, you still have that glimmer of hope, right?
Yes.
There's these emotions that come back that you weren't feeling. You get to have fun without drinking or using drugs, right?
Yeah.
You get to do hard things or things that you once needed liquid courage for, you no longer do.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you feel like you have this cape, right?
Yes.
And you're like,
I love
yes,
the
I can do
cape.
this. I've conquered this. And so it's, but then it normalizes over time. It's your norm. So you no longer realize, oh wow, this is something special that I have because it's just something I do. It's another thing I do.
It's like different ideas of leveling up.
Right? So you lose that emotional connection with it almost. And so for 14, it was really specific moment for me of, my daughter every night would come kiss me during COVID, just check on me. And like, I was getting irritated. Who wants to be woken up every night? But then one night she did it and I didn't feel anything. And I was like, wait, something's going on. What's happening? Like, why am I not feeling? Of course, any mother would feel something. I mean, it really had me take a look at myself and go, okay, what's happening? Um, and what I realized was even though I was doing the things, I really had lost connection with feeling in my spark.
What does that mean?
The spark is connecting with what you're aligned with, being grounded in really what lights you up, your passion, yourself. Like for me, one of my core values is freedom. But I was so just rigid in my living, right? And so because of just schedule and having to maintain everybody's schedule and provide everybody else's needs. So I fell into that and lost that. And so when you said early on Pink Cloud, that was freedom for me. Like I just kind of walked to my own rhythm. And that doesn't mean I was like careless or irresponsible. No. But I lived life. It had some structure, but then I also had this ebb and flow that was very free, like I have now. Right. And so I was like, all right, where did I went back to when I felt that spark. And for me, it was probably around 25, 26. And I was like, what was I doing then? What were the things I was doing that created this spark? I was like loving life so much. Um, and I went back to the basics of,
And you were sober at 20, 25, and
yes,
26. What do you mean? So talk us through the basics when you say I went back to the
yes.
basics and how did you know to go back to that spot in your life?
It's interesting. I'm an analyzer, huge analyzer just of
Okay.
myself. And when things don't work out, I'm like, I gotta fix it. I'm a fixer. So I was like, something's wrong. Let's go digging under every little corner of my life of what's wrong. Um, and somebody asked me, they're like, okay, well, when did you feel like your best self? And it was that age. And what I also recognized was I was probably the healthiest I'd ever been at that age. I put a lot of energy into just, I love fitness. Like that's a passion of mine in general. It always has been. I think just being an athlete growing up, it's there. And I was doing that. I was hanging out with people I loved a lot that really filled me and I filled them. I had a lot of gems in my life, I'd say. And it was like, okay, I need to start there. When I go and work out, when I'm in the gym, when I'm lifting weights, that is like where I found not only find my peace, but I also get really empowered there. Right? It just gives my brain this like soothing sensation. Um, so I started focusing on that, which was like really helpful. And being a mom after two children, and you get to that stuck point, you're like,
Yes.
I'm doing everything, but nothing's happening. I was there.
And their needs are important, right? Because as a mother, right, we're told
Yeah,
it's their needs are we're supposed to meet their needs first. And so eventually I imagine you felt completely tapped out.
totally, without even recognizing it. So
Yeah.
it was like a moment. In a moment, I realized, wow, I'm not even like connected to my like inner core. And so it started with me getting back into fitness and honing in on nutrition, right? And finding my spark in that area through movement.
So
Um,
looking, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like looking back then, how could were there like indicators that you could have noticed ahead of time, right? So if somebody's listening and they're like,
Mm.
wait, I don't want to get to that point where, I realized I completely lost my spark. Looking back, were there things that were happening along the way that were indicators to you that maybe you were kind of slipping further away from that space of joy and happiness?
When I look back, I think people pleasing. That's a big one.
Yeah,
Sneaky. We love
that's
people
a
and we want
big
them to be happy.
You know what they told me in recovery, in rehab? I went to rehab, and I said that like with pride. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm a people pleaser, and they're like, you're a master manipulator. I'm like, oh no, you misunderstood me.
Yeah.
No, I'm
Okay.
a people pleaser. And they're like, that's a fancy word for manipulation because all you're
Mhm.
doing is manipulating other people's feelings so they feel a certain way about you. And you're showing up in a way that's not authentic so they like you. And I'm like, and it was like, when you say it like that, oh my gosh. So what did you do? What were some of the ways that you were people pleasing and with whom?
Yeah. Just in my home. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, if let's say I'm more, again, like I like freedom and I'm just like more free flow and I tend to forget things. Like my brain is so busy. If I don't see something, out of sight, out of mind, we
Yes.
have an amazing spouse who likes everything in order. So then I was like, okay, let me get hyper vigilant. I'm putting everything in order. My brain doesn't work that way, but I started making it work, right? And if I create this or if I do this, then I'll get this like environment that I pictured. Because I, like you said, actually trying to create an environment that I had wanted. When I have a home, it's going to be calm and peaceful and happy. And so I'm going to do whatever it takes to create this environment. So that, I
Beautiful.
mean, I think they were very spot on. It's such a subtle way of, manipulating or making something happen the way you want it. But at the end, I think what it did is it made me disconnect from myself and then just like almost shrink myself to where I forgot who I was. So I think that's it. When you start like negotiating on some of your non-negotiables.
Just had a conversation with a woman about this today. I'm like, what are your non-negotiables? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, let's figure those out.
Yeah.
Because then you find out what you do want, right?
Hmm.
And I think this idea too of, and tell me if this resonates with you or what you think about it. It's like we have an idea of what we want it to look like, right? When you say I want this happy home and it's peaceful and it's neat and all these things, but the process to get there feels so inauthentic and uncomfortable. What comes up for you when I say that?
Absolutely. Because it comes with like some grr, because you're like trying to make this thing happen, right? Like
Yeah.
it's creating it versus like what creates happiness, what creates flow. It's like acceptance, letting people be who they are in that environment
I
versus
love
going,
that.
oh, okay, if it's this way, well, then I get this outcome. Versus like, hey, you can be super organized and want it this way. And also I can be unorganized in this way. And how do we find that happiness in that? Or how do we create happiness within that?
And you're also, and I want to point out too, and I didn't mention this, you're a therapist. And so you work with people in this space. And so
Yeah.
even, even though you had all of this information and knowledge, it was still something that kind of snuck up on you as, yeah.
And I think it's because, from a young age, I learned how to do my way through emotions and feelings. And so I think
Oh,
without even, and
go back to
yeah,
that. What do you mean? Do your way through emotions and feelings.
so you might acknowledge them for 2 seconds and then you get to work. You put your head down and just keep working.
You overthink your emotion or you outthink your
You
emotion. Is
outthink
that?
it. You outwork it. You outwork your emotions. Think about it, even going back to sports, athletes,
Yeah.
training, nerves. What do we do?
Dissociate.
And go, right? So it's so easy to slide that into everyday life as well without even knowing it so subtly.
So what do we do? What do we do differently?
What do we do differently?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. What do I do differently? First is awareness, right? That mindfulness of like, oh, I didn't realize my fight or flight is hyperproductivity. Most people would want that as their response. For me, it's not good because when I'm not in alignment, yes, I could produce a lot of stuff, but it doesn't come from a place of purpose. And I don't feel like it's that meaningful, right? It's not going to make as big of impact. So it's really important for me to stay aligned. That's what I learned. So like on that bucket. Um, and so it's stepping back in that knowledge of, okay, wait, why am I putting my head down and working? What am I avoiding? What emotions or what situations do I need to face? And what realities do I need to accept as I own?
We talked, I shared, I think it was on social about, right. And this is kind of what it is, changing feelings versus processing feelings, right? Because often we are angry or we're sad or we feel this way and we don't want to feel that way. And so we stuff it down, whether it's through drinking or shopping or anything outside of ourselves to try to make it disappear versus processing, which is sitting with them. Can you talk about that? Like, what does changing feelings versus processing feelings mean to you?
So yeah, two totally different. So I think,
Yeah.
changing feelings is when you, and in DBT, we call distress tolerance skills. Right? Like you will distract with something, put on a happy Netflix show,
Yeah.
talk to a friend. But what happens is when you stop doing that thing, the emotion still is there. You come
Like
back to it.
drinking.
Yeah, you come back to it. Drinking, you come back to it, right?
Yeah.
You're done, scrolling on Instagram?
Yeah.
Okay, once you shut it down for the night and you put your head down, guess what? Those emotions and feelings are still there. Versus processing. Processing takes time. It takes lots of tears. Let's be honest. Lots of breaking down, writing, prayer, meditation. And a big one for me is listening. You know, a lot of times we talk about, okay, pray, pray, pray. Or like, meditate to something, but the art of just listening to what you're being guided to do or feel, or just even just need for holding space for you to process those emotions. It doesn't necessarily have to be another human being.
I always heard that prayer is asking for help and meditation is hearing it.
Hmm.
And so they kind of go hand in hand. Like praying is like, I don't know, whether it's whatever you believe in,
Right. Yeah.
something outside of ourselves, right? I think prayer is like, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm struggling. Please help me. And the meditation is that getting quiet. And whether it's your inner voice that's speaking to you or something outside of yourself
Hmm.
that's dropping it into your mind. And it's that idea of they like work in tandem. And I loved that.
I do. I love that too. And so many people, it's funny when I tell them I just listen, and they're like, what do you mean? What do you listen for? I hear myself. They're like, Nisha, what are you hearing? I know. And I'm like, you know what? I tell people, especially if you're out there and you're starting, you're like, okay, what do you two listen to? I know it sounds funny. Right. Tell people start with writing. Like you can ask a question or whatever, and then sit for a few minutes in silence and then write whatever comes in your mind. It doesn't have to make sense. It can make sense. Eventually it'll flow out.
And no
It takes
judgment, like no
no
self
judgment.
judgment, right?
No, and it gives people, I think a lot of people need things to do when they're trying to listen. It helps, right? Think about our children who are hyperactive. Like they have a fidget, then they can listen. But if they don't, then it's hard. So same thing, I feel like writing is a tool to be
Oh, I
able
love
to
that.
allow it the message to come in.
And that's really good probably for because a lot of people say like I can't meditate, I can't sit still for that long. And so writing sounds like I mean what you're saying is like a really good entry into that hearing your voice and being able to get it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And discerning like that, your own like worry anxious voice versus like maybe your higher power voice.
I was just listening to a book on James Doty.
Hmm.
We talked about this and I was listening to something on I need to correct this, but basically when this is my interpretation of it, when you use something outside of yourself, right? Like shopping, food, sex,
Hmm.
drugs, drinking, anything like that, your body, to fix a feeling, your body internalizes the stress of that as if it were the stress of a chronic illness.
Hmm.
Where if we can do these tools like that you're talking about, the writing, the meditating, breathing, sitting and, regulating your nervous system, our body can then start to change the stress or adapt to the, not adapt to it. We can start overcoming the stress and kind of regulate the nervous system in a healthy way that our body doesn't see as stress.
Right. It doesn't see it as a threat, right?
Yes.
Because I think the more you ignore it or you put something on it, the louder it becomes. It's when we tune into it and actually help your body meet its need of calming down first, right? Then it's able to feel safe to then even process. Because like trying to process when you feel unsafe, it can be really hard. It's like trying to talk logic into a screaming tantrum toddler. Not
Telling
happening.
you've heard that funny thing. It's like telling someone that to calm down when they're stressed. It's like, does that ever work? Has it ever worked to calm down? Never.
How does it make you feel?
Yeah, right. Like, don't
How
tell
do
me to
I
calm down.
feel?
And so, how did you start feeling like you were coming back to yourself? So, kind of going back to that 14-year, your daughter came and kissed you, didn't feel anything. You acknowledged it. You became kind of aware of it.
Hmm.
You went back to that 26-year-old you and started lifting weights and doing what was the process like coming back home to yourself and finding yourself back in that flow?
Oh my gosh, it felt so good.
Yeah.
It was like, hello, welcome back. Seriously. And, it was like, we've been waiting. Um, and it was fun because my daughters got to see it. It became a family thing. We all got healthy. It wasn't just a journey of me, but it was also like I'm doing it for them to see. And my oldest is super intuitive. So she can tell, even if I'm like trying to be like cool, calm, collected mom, she can sense when I'm like stressed or something. She's like, do you need to go for a walk outside? Like, she's so funny. And so she could also see me just come alive and be more playful again. Um,
I love
right?
this. We need to get our
And
kids together because
we
my
should.
oldest is like that.
Yeah.
My
And
oldest, my only.
I mean, I think you can adopt mine too, don't worry.
Okay.
Um, and it's that. allowing her also when she messes up and she leaves them, it's okay. If she forgets something. Oh my gosh, a water bottle, it's not the end of the world, honey. Our brains work a little faster. But
And our nervous system.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it just takes slowing down. And if we adults have problems, with that, I do. I shouldn't say we, but so is she. So I think it's through that. And then people in my community started seeing the change in me, just like physique change in me, first of all.
Yeah.
And realizing that I was able to inspire others to get healthy and get fit and start working on themselves in that aspect. I was like, oh, back to purpose we go. My purpose is to help people in a different way. Again, I think when we do something for so long, we forget how powerful it is. And so I've been doing therapy for a while, right? And so then I was like, oh, I can actually inspire people outside of my office and clinic. Um, I know who I was like, I would never post any, I just didn't want any of that. And I started because people were listening and watching. I was like, okay, I can make an impact here. And I felt like I did, which was so neat to now change the conversation around the dinner tables, right? When I went out with girlfriends and stuff, it wasn't always about what you watch. More, it was like, how do you feel? What did you lift? Like, how do you know when you need to lift more weights? Like, it's just different conversation. It was fun to hear, and people wanting to improve, I think. Um, which then also, right, reconnecting with people in recovery and realizing, wow, like what we're talking about today, like there's a lot of people that talk about early recovery and there's lots of support, but it's like, what happens when you get to like 14 plus years? And then it hit me like, doing, hello, you're in that. Like, you've walked the path. It's time for you to share and lead down that way. Um, I think you get to a place where you're like, okay, I'm ready. Because I also think, I don't know if you were taught early on in recovery, but you know, you do whatever you need to protect it. So you share where it's appropriate. You share when you don't share when you don't feel the need to. When I did that for
Yeah. Because you didn't share about your recovery.
not for a really long time. I mean, I just did recently. I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think in 16 years, right? So that was the first.
16 it came out. Yeah,
Okay.
I
So
was
mine
like,
was
here I go.
15 years. Yeah. Same thing. And it was, I never felt ready. And I feel like when you're ready, you're ready. And that same thing. And it was like, if I can help one other person that's listening or watching to feel like sobriety is okay and not to, because I'm like, if I'm feeling shame, what about someone else that has a day, a month, a year? Like, what am I telling them? And so I don't, and it was coming out of, COVID. And I was like, I don't have the luxury of staying silent anymore when other people are struggling. And I could help. It was literally I was like, just one woman, because the ripple effect of one woman, I think getting help or getting sober or finding her voice, the impact on family and children and everything is so far reaching, that ripple effect and that wave
Hmm.
effect. And so so that was your kind of impetus to start sharing.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was just like yours. It was that I kept hearing this like sober curious movement. What is that and how to do it? And, you know, and I've done it. It hit me like 16 years. Like, you've done this successfully. You haven't just
That's,
done it.
yes.
Like, and I think when that hits you, you're like, wait, okay. And it was one of those things where I thought about it 2 years ago, and then I was like, nah, it didn't feel right. And things always cycle back twice for me when I feel like I'm really called to do something, and it came again. Um,
And
and I
that's
just had
neat.
the right support and people in my life to be like, yeah, like you're right, like you're onto something. And again, it felt very aligned with me and like just that driven, like when I decided, okay, it's time is now.
And what did you notice any shifts or changes in you when you shared it for the first time?
Yeah, it was like again another like level of like how I love freedom, like another level of freedom, right? Like
Yes.
that thing is gone.
Yes.
Like, didn't you share it? Like yes, we
Yes.
share authentically, and some people will say that. Well, are you fully transparent and authentic if you don't share that piece of you? Well, yes, you can show up still authentically without that, right? Like we
Yes.
don't have to wear it on our forehead.
Right.
Like people don't just wear their wounds on their forehead. So like yes. And I think it was just the right timing. It was aligned where it just now I'm like, oh well, it's out there now. So I get to help the world on a larger scale, which that was the purpose anyways. And
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to do.
I love that. I feel like, yeah, for me it was a weight lifted that I didn't know I was carrying.
Yes.
And then and now someone's like, "You're so open." I'm like, "Well, you know everything. I mean, what's not to be open about now? Like, I'll tell you anything you want to know." It's like because
Right.
there's no shame around it anymore, where I didn't realize the weight of the self-perceived shame that I was carrying.
I can totally relate. It was that perceived.
Yeah.
Right? And also, it started not feeling authentic for people to ask, well, why are you so into like mental wellness? Or how are you so intuitive? Or how did you know so early on? Like, you know a lot about yourself. Why do you do all this self development? Right?
Yeah.
And it's easy for people to assume that it just came easier out of nowhere. But what I have found is most people that, do the work that we do have come from somewhere, right? And it's not fair just to share the like end product. It's important for people to know, hey, we had a day one too.
Yeah.
And the
Oh
day
my
one doesn't need to
gosh.
be like on a
I
screen, right? Like probably not. It's better for your recovery if it's not on a screen. Um,
Nobody wants to see day one. Well, I mean,
no,
maybe, but like for me,
maybe,
it's the empower, like the change and like the yeah, because
yeah,
all of our day ones look different, right? Like my worst, and we talk about that with trauma, right? Like my trauma is my trauma, and it feels like the worst trauma on the planet. Because for me, it is the worst trauma on the planet, and everybody else's is the same, right? So everyone else's day one may look different from my day one. It could look different from your day one, but it feels the same, right? It's all that feeling of new, we're starting and doing something new and something really
mhm,
scary. Um, but you talk about being curious in
mhm,
recovery.
yeah.
Talk to me about that because I love this. I love the idea of just staying curious. What does that mean to you?
So curiosity, what that means to me is like instead of looking at it like I'm going to get to this goal and then I'm done, right? I
Mm,
think early on it's easy to be like year one and yes, I made it. But then two, three, four, like that loses ammo.
yeah.
So staying curious for me, and especially these later years, is it's not curiosity around the solution to the problem, right? Which
Mm,
with substance, it's more of staying curious on deeper levels, right? So when I lost my spark, it's the curiosity of, okay, where am I spiritually? Where am I physically and mentally? And uncovering and asking questions around each of those things. Because that leads to growth and consistency in growth.
And it's also very empowering because when you can reflect back on yourself, right? Like where am I, where did I lose my spark? Where am I in spirituality? It it empowers me and to take control of it, right? Then I have a choice. It's my not like, oh, well, this happened to me and that person did this to me and oh, that I'm hopeless. And so
Hmm.
I love the idea of curiosity as empowerment.
Absolutely. It is empowerment, right? It's your way of, like you said, uncovering, redefining, like problem solving, right? It is doing, and sometimes curiosity is going, for me, it has been at least like the past 6 months of you're doing too much. Just sit down and be. Well,
Oof.
what the curiosity of why is it so hard for us just to be as doers?
Why is that? What have you found?
Yeah. Oh, because then you don't know outcome. And if you don't know outcome, then it's just,
Yeah.
it goes into like, again, like that faith and like, where does that sit? And like, how? And I think that's the beauty of long term sobriety and recovery is like getting these deeper conversations and questions with yourselves and others in your lives of like, okay, so if why can't I sit still? Why don't I like silence? What is some of that? What am I avoiding? What do I not like?
Yeah. It's so true, especially like as we talk about as athletes, right? Because we are doers and performers and achievers, and that's how you measure success. Or, as a student, or and so it's hard just to accept that for me, you're a kind person, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, but what do you get from that? Like, what is the point? What do I bring to the table? You
They're
know?
like, yeah, yeah. Do they get the blue ribbon or not? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I know. Do I get it? Exactly. Am I the kindest person in the world, or because just kindness isn't going to cut
Yeah.
it? Like,
And that's right. And I think it's also like the curiosity of why isn't it working? That's been a big
Yes.
one, right? So
Yeah.
again, going back to like gaining your spark, so many times I have clients that I coach that are like, yeah, but I do my gratitude list and I do my prayer every day and I, drink my water and I exercise 4 times a week. But then we go into like, okay, are these out of habit? Are you actually present while you're doing these things? Like your
You're checking the
gratitude,
box.
yeah,
Yeah.
gratitude list. Are you actually feeling like the gratitude, right?
That's
Like,
a, yeah,
don't make
that's
a
a
list
real
of
one.
10 things. Like, find one thing you're grateful for and spend 2 minutes just awing and how wonderful it is for you.
Yes. And that was something I think I'd forgotten about that. Like yeah, make a list of 10 things you're grateful for. I'm like, cool, 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 cool. And I'd write them all down. And then I think it was Bob Proctor that talked about like change your paradigm, change your life. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, feel how it feels as you write it. Like, of course, I'm grateful for a shower and I have a home, and all those things. And it's like,
Water.
well, but like, feel how grateful you are.
Mhm.
And that changed the idea of a gratitude list for
Yeah.
me. And I love that you brought that up because otherwise, it does just become routine.
Routine. And that's when we start losing it. That connection with ourselves too. When we're in routine,
Yeah.
we lose connection.
When you just kind of walk through it, like mindlessly.
And I'm just doing it because I that's what I was told to do because it's going
Yeah.
to guarantee this result.
Yes.
And then
And
you're
so,
like, wait, stop working. What now
so
what?
yeah. And then now what? So then now
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. So I think it's things like that, switching it up, right?
Yeah.
Versus 10, gratitude, one. Um, for exercise, I mean, for exercising, it can be instead of always running, I was like, I love sprint work. Start walking instead.
You and I are the complete opposite. You lift heavy weights and sprint. I want to do long runs and like not touch a weight ever. I do now, but like,
Eventually, we're gonna have to like swap watch
I
because
know
it's gonna stop working, right?
I've started lifting and it's not bad. But it comes back to that being curious, what you said, right? Like trying something new.
Mhm. Yeah.
What are some
And
new
it was
things that you've tried that you loved? Or have you found anything that you love? Well, lifting
ooh,
heavy, or you've
lifting
always
heavy.
lifted
I've
heavy?
always lifted heavy,
Okay.
so that's always been fun for me. Not running as much, actually.
The
So I
walking.
walk more now to be from
I
being a
love that.
runner. So that's been great for me. What else new? Um, just even my practices with like prayer and spirituality and meditation. It used to be always a seated practice, and I just had this ritual around it. But now I can go outside and do it. I'll shake it up, or if I forget in the morning, I'll do it in the middle of the day. It doesn't have to be so planned out. Meditation doesn't always have to be 15, 20 minutes. It could be 2 to 5 minutes.
Do you struggle with that as an athlete? Meaning, like, if it's not an hour where I'm dripping with sweat and just like can't get up off the mat, or perfect 30 minutes in complete silence, it doesn't count.
And
Like,
that's just,
yes,
that
that's a
is a
shift for me.
big shift I've had.
How did you get to that point?
I think through trial and error of realizing
Okay.
like I didn't need to work out that whole hour, sweat my entire body worth of fluids out in order to get a result because I was doing that and not getting results.
And then not being able
Really
to pick up your girls the next day because you're so sore. It's like a different,
correct.
it's, yeah.
And I was doing that, right? I was working out more before. And I started working out less when I found my spark. And it was interesting. So I was overdoing. Now that we're saying this, I'm like, yeah, actually it was a big lesson for me of doing less sometimes is actually better for you. Recovery is important. Like recovery is being rest. But like resting is important. Being, not
And that's
doing.
hard because people think it's lazy and it's not. It's like what you need. Like, what does your body need? Right. And I think that's a hard thing too. It's like giving ourselves what we need. And like you were talking, like movement as love, right? Like moving our body for love,
Hmm.
not for an outcome, or getting quiet for 5 minutes because it's all we have. But that little bit is going to be more helpful than doing nothing.
Hmm.
But I think it's like that all or nothing mentality, at least for me, the all or nothing mentality that I
It
had to
is.
get over.
It's exactly what I did. The extremes, right? Black and white. Or like imagine meditating for 20 minutes, but yet you're doing your to-do list at the same time. Like that's not productive. Like, what? Just do 5 minutes of
No.
concentrated and then do your to-do list and get moving. That 5 minutes to me is way more powerful than the 20 minutes of excruciating, like, meditation while doing, like, you're not even meditating, you're doing a to-do list at the same time.
Took me back to like a yoga class, like early on when I was like thinking about all I had to do after the yoga class.
Uh-huh.
Instead of like, okay, I'm going to be
Yeah.
present in this hour and then right
Yeah.
I'll get to that stuff when I'm done. But
That's so funny you said that. I remember, it was not the last yoga class I took, but one several years back, probably when I was in my freedom phase in my 20s. And I was like, yeah, I was getting into yoga again. And then I went into this one class and I literally was like, I need to run. I need to run really fast. And like she
run right
started,
out of here.
I did.
Did
I
you?
was in the front of the class. I literally was like, that's how, like, I just was like, I'm so sorry. I gotta go. And like rolled up my mat and ran out and literally just jumped on a bed and like, I was talking about being in tune with what you need in that moment versus like sitting there and just excruciating. But in the mid
Yeah.
years, I probably would have just sat there and be like, okay, I committed to this. I have to do this. I have to do this. I think there is definitely a need to do that at times. But when we do that a lot and consistently in our lives, that's when we, I think, lose alignment with ourselves
Mhm. It's hard
a
to like
lot.
navigate discipline, right? Versus like spontaneity or, it's like versus like jumping from thing to thing. Like then you get in the treadmill and you're like, I don't want to be here either. And then you're like, oh, I think I really want to go lift weights. And you lift weights and you're like, I don't want to be here either. It's like, okay,
You don't want to be
what's
anywhere.
the, yeah,
What's going on? And I
yes,
think that's the beauty of having a community of people,
yeah,
right? It, it's interesting because you can fall into the like, well, it should look like this by our age, and mine does not, and yours doesn't. We laugh
just
about that.
we
Like,
talked about this right before. Yeah.
right before, I was like, I
Yeah.
have gems, and they're all shapes and sizes and
Talk about
ages.
gems. Talk about
And
gems. You brought that up
gems
a
are
couple
like,
times. I love this.
they're like the people in my life. They're my community, literally from everywhere, all ages, genders, but people that I connect with on a regular basis. And we don't have to connect every day, but when we do, it literally can fill each other. It can be me and you sending a text to each other or sharing a meditation and you being like, yes, I needed to hear your voice today. It works. And I think, so many times we feel like it should look a certain way, but for me, that's what it looks like today. It's not about the quantity or how often we get together, but it's when we get together, what happens, right? The quality of the
Yes.
connection that we have. And I have people in my life today to be like, okay, Nisha, like, you need to settle down. You committed to this. Do the thing. Stop jumping around because that's how my brain works. On the other side, I have some people that are like, oh, your brain works amazing. Yes, you have all these creative ideas. Like, run with them. You can do anything, but you need both, right?
Grounding, both sides.
Grounding,
And
both
I
sides.
love I love that gem and something that you and I both, or what we recently shared. I think it may not have seemed like much to you, right? And that's where I think the power in this comes in, just having the community. And you and I were trading voice memos back and forth. And I just made the comment like, oh, shifting from work mode to mom mode. I know you're doing the same soon. Hope it's a good, like something like that.
Yeah.
And you came back with, and then we kind of went back and you were like, sometimes it's hard to be the really conscious mom. And we had a conversation, I'm like, yes, because we both know better, right? We have long-term sobriety. We have all these tools and we try to, I think, I'm speaking for you if I'm not correct, but we try to show up for our kids in that same conscious way, right? So we can give them the tools. And we're like, but man, some days it's hard to be, to
Overly
have it.
skilled, we're overskilled.
Yes. And I love that. But in that moment, you're so right. I was like, I didn't realize how much I needed that almost validation from somebody else that I look up to, and that I love the way in our conversations that you parent and some of the, a lot of the intentionality you put into it and the work you're doing and all these things. And I didn't realize how much I needed that little bit of almost like me too. And I was like, oh, okay, good. As I was like looking at my clock, it's 8 o'clock. We got to get out of the bath. We need to do these things. And you're like, oh, I struggle with that too. Or sometimes I just
Yes,
want to hurry them up, even though I know I should. And so I love that concept of gem. It's like the bright shining light when you
you need it.
need it. Yeah.
I know. And it's like you said, it's so powerful in so many different ways, right? And being able to, I think, Identifying them in your life and not the ones that you have to have, the ones you want to have. Because that's also very, you know, that's very, it's a gray area. There are certain relationships we have to have in our lives. I mean, everything's choice, but I think just being family oriented and stuff like that, that we want them and we have to. So keeping that in mind too, and just being able to navigate all of it. It doesn't all have to be, I think, sparkling and beautiful and all these big magic moments. Some of them are just because you, and that's what healthy people do.
And I want to hear more about, so as we transition from like this gems and this beautiful community that we have in our life, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we're both big supporters, advocates, fill in the blank of community and just how important
Hmm.
that is. And now you've taken this and put it into some of your work, right? So now you're a therapist, you said DMT, so you've done that for,
CBT, I've done a little bit
what did I say?
of
DMT. Sorry.
DMT. It's okay.
What is DMT? Oh, no, you don't do DMT. DMT is plant medicine. Maybe you do. I don't know, but we won't go there. But like,
No, but
it's like,
too hard. I was
I'm
like,
like,
okay, we're
you do.
human. This is amazing. Human.
You're not a plant medicine facilitator. You're a DBT therapist.
I'm gonna have people pinging me
I
now.
know, right?
Hey, when is your next retreat? I'm gonna be like, I don't have any. I don't know. I don't do that. Doesn't exist.
Misinformation. Human moment. So you've
Human.
done that for years, and now
Yep.
you've started working with people in like a sober coaching capacity.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear more about that and about that space and kind of how they work together. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Again, it was one of those moments of like, okay, how can I help in a different way? I wanted to help on a larger scale.
Yeah.
It's where it all started a few years ago. Of like, how can I make a bigger impact than I'm making one on one? Um, and then it slowly evolved into coaching as well as, doing podcasts and speaking where I'm asked. And so really my coaching is revolved around women and men in three different phases. They are either sober curious, like, do I want to be curious? Do I not? What does that look like? Navigating early stages. Someone who's also just left a treatment facility, maybe even an outpatient place, because a lot of times what happens is even if you don't go out of state, right, they have these guidelines that you should follow if you want to stay sober. And they'll be like, oh, go to 12 step or go to smart recovery. But all groups are not created equal, right? Even though the principles and the foundations are, the actual groups are not. And what I have found is a lot of people don't go because the group that they maybe were going to when they were in treatment, they fell in love with. But then when they went somewhere else, it wasn't the same. And so they're like, oh, these aren't my people.
Yeah.
So working with those individuals, really bridging the gap between being in treatment or some type of outpatient place into real life. How do we continue our sobriety? How do we continue to build that foundation that's right for us and where we are in our lives? Because it can look so different for so many. My way is not always the right way. And I think when you and I got sober, there's probably less choices, and now there's a ton more choices out there. Yeah, I know. I know.
Yes, there was
Yeah,
not many options. And now that's what I say, like, it's so beautiful that people have the choices. There's like Annie Grace and Naked Mind for the health, there's online recovery support groups. There's so many options. And so it's really beautiful. But yeah, I'm with you. There weren't that many
yeah.
options when we got
No.
sober.
And then those who relapse, right? That have like been there,
Yes.
done really stepping back with them and feeling the deeper layers, getting curious with them because it's not just the habit that keeps coming back, right? There's unresolved stuff there. And I feel like that takes time and space and safety and vulnerability to uncover. And so doing that work with people as well through and using my therapeutic modalities, whether it's DBT skills involving some hypno, right? I do hypnotherapy as well as Reiki. Yeah, yeah. So I
Um,
really take a holistic approach depending on who it is and what their needs are and where I feel it leads
that was my question. If you kind of married the two, like the therapeutic
them. Hmm.
process and a little bit of coaching, but something else you do that's really interesting. You
Hmm.
pull oracle cards.
I do.
I love this.
Yeah.
Where did you find this? Like, how does this, is this personal, professional? Do you use it in both? What's your,
So both.
mostly? Yeah.
Yeah, both. So I love meditating on them. Um, just depending on what it
What
is.
is
And
it?
sometimes it's just like a North Star for my day. Like, okay, where do I need to focus or look out for guidance on? Um, and sometimes it can be specific questions. This happens super organically. Like, I can't even tell you. I went to a conference and they had all these cards and decks, and I was like, oh, yeah. And you have all these experienced people that do this for a living. And I was like intimidated, like,
Yeah.
I just start doing this. I don't know. Um, and so I got curious. And I was like, okay, so this deck is calling to me. So I got it. And my curiosity just kept me down that road. And I feel like it's also helped like my intuitive connection like get stronger as well. Really that listening in. And so I do it for fun. Sometimes I have friends ask me to pull. Sometimes I have clients be like, did you pull? And I'm like, yeah. So usually, yeah, that's how
It's really fun. I love that.
it
And
is.
like you, I'm a, do you know anything about human design? Have you explored that?
Why, what are you, Hilary?
So I'm a
You don't mind
five,
doing
what am I? I'm a 5-1 emotional generator.
manifesting generator.
Do you know your lines?
You know what? I have to look them.
Okay.
I have to
So
have them in my head.
I wonder if you're a 5-1 then. That's right. So I'm a 5-1, and what that means is unless I am fully an expert, know everything, feel like I can't learn more, I won't share. So when you talk about the cards, like same thing, like I love the play, like I love exploring and playing with, and understanding them. And for that same, like maybe journaling or just pulling for intuition and feeling like what, asking a question and pulling it. But for the longest time, I was like you were saying at the conference, if I'm not an expert and I don't know everything and what every card means and what the pyramids are and like how to lay them all out, then I'm just not, I can't talk about it. And so I love that you found a space for them in your life to
I have. I
play.
feel like we overcomplicate that part of life a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? Like the
Yes.
most like untechnical, like spiritual, like flowy thing, we've put so many parameters on how to's around them. And when I was, I had my intuitive coach be like, people put too many parameters around these things. Like it's not supposed to be like that. Right? And I was like, oh, okay. And that almost it gave me permission
Yeah.
to not have to do it perfectly, to do it as it is, as it's meant to do it, so as it's meant to be practiced.
Um, and so we're about to wrap up, but I have
Yeah,
one more question for you.
yeah.
What are 3 things? And so, this is a safe space for women, right? To come and maybe hear their story or maybe hear another story of a woman that's overcome challenges. And I would love for you to share 3 things, whether it's a quote or a tip or a tool or a practice that any woman can maybe try or use in their life as they navigate a challenge or transition. What are your 3 favorite?
First one is check in with yourself daily. Really check in, like in the morning. How are you doing? How are you doing? Right. Number two, who's supporting you? It's easy to have, again, a community that you reach out to help, but who's helping you? Are you letting them? Because that's hard. That was hard for me. I had people like force me to like take help, I'm like, am I that bad? Like a friend dropped off a goodie bag about self-care, and I'm like, wait, why are you? But that's what you need sometimes is reminders. So you have a place of actually being vulnerable and sharing the hard stuff with. And then my third one would be have some fun. Like really, like if it means like getting your nails done, getting glammed, or I don't know, having a fun workout outfit or new hair color, whatever it is for you, go do it. Have some fun. This is serious work, but there's also a lot of fun in it.
Yes. I love that. everything was like focused you, right? Like
Yeah.
check in with
Yes.
you, what you need, who's helping you, and do something fun that you think is fun. It's like irrelevant what anybody else thinks.
Correct.
I love this.
Because we focus on everyone so much.
All the time. All the
Hmm.
time. Nisha, where can people find out more about you?
Yes, so
The
you
work
can
you're
follow
doing.
me on Instagram at Nisha Patel Coaching, or you can go to my website at theniche.com.
I love that. And we'll link them all in the show notes. But
Awesome.
thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you.
This
This
was
has
so
been
wonderful to
wonderful.
have a conversation. And I look forward to more gems.
Absolutely. Take care.